Hello and welcome to another Looney Tunes review video. If you are new to the channel, make sure you subscribe to follow my journey to review all 1000 Looney Tunes shorts and give this video a like as well. So this is a review for I Like Mountain Music, released in 1933. It's the 57th in the series and it's directed by Rudolph Ising. You can find this on the Looney Tunes Golden Collection Volume 6 DVD set in an unrestored form, but there is a beautiful HD restoration on the Warner Archive release, Ladies They Talk About. Now, in case you haven't seen this one, it is under copyright after all, so I can't show you the full thing here, but it's your typical Merry Melodies, objects coming to life short, where we see all sorts of weird and wonderful characters, and in a typical fashion for an early Merry Melody short, we have some drama in the third act where some villains try to rob a, well, till in this store.
They can dish it out, but they can't take it.
So first up, you're going to hear a re-edit of the original audio commentary I did before I had to take that down. Thanks to my good friend Blue Genocide for re-editing that. You'll then hear some new thoughts from me, and then you'll hear from my good friend Manny Cruz, the Toonie tenor, who will discuss the music in this short, as it is a Merry Melodies one. So grab some popcorn and enjoy. And I tell you, when I saw that picture, I thought he was flipping the bird, but he's clearly not. It's the wrong finger. And here it's all the comics and pulp magazines. Now keep in mind that this is 1933, so Superman hadn't come on the scene, doesn't come into the scene until 1938. So what we see is just basically pulp magazines and that sort of thing. And in my researching in this cartoon, apparently it's the earliest known hillbilly cartoon. Well, go figure. And I'm pretty sure that this toy magazine animation was used before in the shanty that Santa Claus lives. We've got reused animation here from Pagan Moon. So definitely an excuse to reuse some of this stuff. At least it makes sense to reuse it. And again, I would have mentioned in the previous commentary that people wouldn't have watched all these cartoons in a row like I'm doing with these commentaries. They were just seen amongst other movies and short subjects and whatnot, and that's that. No one really took these things too seriously. Yeah, this one is definitely one of the stronger of the Rudolph Ising shorts released. It's quite funny, got nice animation. Sure, a lot of it's reused, but at least it makes complete sense to reuse it here. And we're gonna have a cameo of a character that was really huge this year, 1933, King Kong. Great movie if you haven't seen it. Amazing special effects. So those are my original thoughts, and before we get into the cartoon into more detail, I just wanted to point out how great this new restoration is, because it also allows you to read a lot of the details in the back, and not that you need it to enjoy a cartoon like this, but you can just see some nice little Easter eggs here and there, which I think is fantastic. Now this short is filled with a lot of celebrity references, so I'll go through the ones that I definitely know of. So first of all, the person on the top left is English actor, playwright and filmmaker George Arliss, who was an English actor who found success in the United States. Now this piano player, and I'm going to butcher its name, but I'm going to try anyway, Ignacy Jan Paderewski, who was a Polish pianist and composer. He was also the third Prime Minister of Poland and actually was present when signing the Treaty of Versailles. So, yeah, there's definitely a lot to this guy. Definitely look it up, but yeah, that's who he is. The person on the right is someone who should be familiar with anyone who's a fan of Looney Tunes, and that's Eddie Cantor, who was an American singer, vaudevillian, performer, actor, and so on. And yeah, there was definitely quite a few shorts featuring him, as his face was definitely ripe for caricature. Now I looked into this reference a little further, and what it appears to be is that this violin player is David Rubinoff, who was a violinist and orchestra leader who used to be on Cantor's radio show. And when he says Jimmy, he's probably referring to Jimmy Wallington, who was the show's announcer at the time. If I am wrong about those details, definitely let me know in the comments below.
Look, Jimmy, it's Rubinoff.
So this person here is Will Rogers, and he was hugely successful. He was a social commentator, actor, vaudevillian performer. He did so much in his life. He traveled around the world many times, and he was one of the highest paid of the Hollywood film stars around this time. Sadly, 2 years after this cartoon was released, he died in a plane crash. So, yeah, how about that? He even says his trademark line in this cartoon, which is,
Well, folks, all I know is what I read in the papers.
this figure skater, I believe, is Sonja Henie, who was a Norwegian figure skater, and not only was she a figure skater and a 3-time Olympic champion, she was also in a few films after this particular short was released. Now, this is Ed Wynn, who you might know him mainly from Mary Poppins. He seems to be more well known from that, but at the time he was big on radio and he was basically a well-known comedian. But what's interesting are the extra references around his caricature there, and I like, first of all, how it says Ed Vin, and you've also got the reference regarding Vexico. See, he was on a radio show at the time, and that was sponsored by Texaco, and the tagline was that the product had quick starting gasoline, so yeah, this one's a bit of a deep cut, but even if you didn't know, it's still pretty funny though. Now, I'm not sure who this woman is referencing. If you know, let me know in the comments below. Although, considering what she's wearing, this is very much a pre-code thing since she almost looks naked there. But College Rumour appears to be a take on the magazine College Humour, which was published from 1920 to 1943. I'm not as familiar with the magazine, but it appears that, yeah, that's what it's referencing to here. So as I briefly mentioned in my original track that you heard not long ago, that what you're seeing in the background a lot of the time in this particular short are what's called pulp magazines. So they were pretty much a precursor to the modern day comic book, because Superman doesn't arrive on the scene until 1938, and then Batman in 1939, and so on. So a lot of the stuff beforehand were, I guess, just cheap entertainment in magazine form. That's probably the simplest way to explain it. But, a lot of people read it. I mean, some of it was also trashy, as you can imagine, but that's essentially what they were, and yeah, not long after this, you would have the explosion of the superhero genre coming out of the comic books. Now, this person here is Edward Gene Robinson, and it's interesting how in the background you can see in the movie magazine says Little Caesar. See, Edward G. Robinson's major breakthrough role was in the movie Little Caesar, which is one of the first fully realised gangster pictures, and it's a really good one. If you haven't seen it, it's definitely a great pre-code movie. But yeah, that's where the reference comes from. Now, I believe the boxer here is a caricature of Jack Dempsey, but in a moment you're going to see Benito Mussolini, and in a weird twist, see, Edward G. Robinson was actually a very outspoken critic of fascism and Nazism during the 1930s, and he shares the same film with one of the most notorious fascists of all time, so yeah, go figure. And of course, we end with a caricature of King Kong known as Ping Pong here. Well, the film itself, King Kong, was a huge hit. It came out in 1933, so roughly around this time the cartoon was released, so must have been a very quick turnaround as we see this beautiful raspberry. But what about the song, you might be asking? Well, for that, here is my good friend Manny Cruz, the Toonie tenor himself. So take it away, Manny.
Hi, everybody. This is Manny Cruz, the Toonie tenor, coming at you with some information, some of my thoughts, and Manny's music time for the 1933 Merry Melody, I Like Mountain Music. So, as I've stated before, I've seen many of these early Merry Melodies about 4 years ago when I started doing my binge of the Warner Brothers library. And the last time I saw I Like Mountain Music, just before Christmas, December 23rd, 2018. It's so nice to see this cartoon in a beautiful HD, as Anthony says, version of it, recently done in HD. Let's talk a little about the cartoon itself. I actually had quite a good time watching this one. It's been a while since I've seen it. In the opening, I paused where the magazine rack was, and I have to point out some of my personal favorite magazines. There's Hooey, and it has hot stuff. And since this was just before the strong enforcement of the Hays Code, let's just say the cover is a little cheeky. Ha 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 ha. You have Vanity Fair, which I think that the caricature that's on the front of the cover, it looks like a creepy version of FDR, but I could be wrong. Another naughty attempt at humor is the whiz bang nasty humor. Animators and writers and everything working at the Harmonizing Studio were a bit of naughty boys per se. But I have to say my personal favorite magazine rack of all is Blah. And it's a political magazine, and if that's not the most appropriate way to describe politics, I don't know what is. Just blah. I did notice though that when you see the clock ringing, the magazine rack is a little bit different than when I do the close up. And this cartoon continues the trend of having things come to life in the Warner Brothers studio. Probably the more famous examples being the trilogy that Frank Tashlin did between 1937 and 1938 with Speaking of the Weather, You're in Education, and Have You Got Any Castles, and the wonderful, excellent cartoon book review from Bob Clampett in 1946. Arguably the best one of the books or things come to life format. There was nothing to beat it after that, so they never attempted it after that point. I thought it was interesting to see the magazine cover. It said it was May of 1933 when that particular issue, and the cartoon would eventually come out in June of 1933. Some of the jokes, obviously, that don't really work well in a modern context. I mean, you have the scene where the cowboy lands on top of a perfume and he gets sprayed and he starts acting effeminate. Again, just a product of its time. Part where you see the African natives and their lips start acting like castanets. Yeah, kind of rough. I never noticed that there was an Asian stereotype during the scene where all the characters in the book start cheering. Just little things like that it sadly is just emblematic of the time period this cartoon was produced. I thought that it was cool the part where one of the cowboys uses the accordion as a horse. The scene where you see the caricature of Will Rogers, who was an immensely popular person at that time period that was reading, died tragically a few years after this cartoon was made. But when he goes up and he takes a no sale sign and puts it next to the copy of the magazine of American Business from around the time that the stock market crashed in 1929. And it just didn't hit me until this rewatch what that meant. I was like, oh, okay, I get the joke. And Will Rogers, he was just a very personable, a very folksy kind of person. And he could approach different subjects, different people, talk about them in a way that nobody would get mad at him because he was just that charming. The Ice Skater, I always love about these harmonizing merry melodies is that they'll take this main song, play around with it. And I like when you see the Ice Skater, it turns into a waltz. So the meter of the song changes from the standard 4/4 time into 3/4 time, becomes a waltz. I always got a kick out of that. The Yodeler, his rubber hose body animation, and it just his huge goofy teeth. I thought it was so funny. I also noticed that the lady that starts singing along with him, and this is something I just never picked up on with the more faded copies, her dress doesn't leave much to the imagination, so that was kind of interesting. My absolute favorite character in this cartoon is the random guy wearing a cool fedora, and he has a mug of beer, and he just says, "Whoopee! Whoopi!" When I was watching this cartoon, I was like, yes, I totally forgot about the Whoopi guy. He's a man. I don't know why. I just always get a kick out of the way he says, Whoopi! And I'm grinning right now. I also really like the part where you see Sherlock Holmes coming out and Watson's, following him along. And just the little rhythmic pattern that they do while Sherlock Holmes is sniffing the floor like a dog and Watson is walking, and it's just his footsteps and the sniffing. Dun dun dun. Dun gung gung gung, that syncopated rhythm that they have from the sniffing. And the cartoon ends with the appearance of a very, very thinly veiled parody of King Kong, or Ping a Pong. I got a kick out of the name. I know that King Kong came out the same year, and I double checked. It was March of 1933 when the film was released. I have to give a shout out to our buddy Blue Genocide. Hi, Blue. I never saw King Kong until I saw it with Blue about a month ago or so. And I do want to get another chance to sit down and watch it, by myself, really check it out. And I have HBO Max, so I might as well take advantage of it. As for the cartoon itself, I will say this is probably one of the more enjoyable merry melodies from this time period. I really enjoyed it. I would have to give it a 7 out of 10. I was thinking maybe 6.5, but 7 out of 10. This one didn't really put me to sleep like the other ones. I mean, it still has a very ham-fisted. I mean, actually, I shouldn't say ham-fisted. The conflict came up a little bit sooner with, the burglars and come on, ya mugs and all that stuff. And the music is just very charming. The gags from the different magazines I thought was really neat. So definitely one of the better ones, and it was a nice way to soon come to an end to the tenure of the Harmonizing Studio. So now it's time for everybody's favorite segment. Well, I hope it is. It's time for Manny's Music Time with music trivia for you today. So let's talk a little bit about the title tune itself. So I like mountain music. came out in 1933, and it was composed by Frank Weldon, and the lyrics were composed by James Kavanaugh. Now, when it came to finding information for the composer, Frank Weldon, there really wasn't much to find. I tried digging around. The only thing I wish I was still back in graduate school where I could really scour through a bunch of databases, but really all I found was he was born in 1900, he died in 1970, and he composed a few songs. Some of them that he composed along with James Kavanaugh, including the songs A Little on the Lonely Side, Buffalo Boy, Christmas in Killarney, I Came, I Saw, I Congoed, and obviously the title track itself, I Like Mountain Music. And there's also The Man with the Mandolin. So not much to say about the composer. This is kind of strange for a Manny's Music Time. Now for the lyricist, James Kavanaugh, I have a little bit more stuff to talk to him about. I mean, I was able to find an article. I couldn't read the whole thing because, they make you pay for it, but from the New York Times. But James Anthony Kavanaugh was born in New York City, October 29th, 1892, and he also passed away in New York City, August 18th, 1967. Besides the title track of I Like Mountain Music, he was also really well known for composing the song Mississippi Mud, which Bing Crosby really made popular. His cause of death was he collapsed at his home and he was living at the Bronx. And according to the New York Times, he lived particularly on 2375 Marion Ave in the Bronx. He passed away at Jacoby Hospital. He was 75 when he passed. I mean, there's not really much to say about those guys. But when it comes to the cartoon itself, I want to talk briefly about some of the cues. So the title track, I Like Mountain Music, it's a charming little song. It was used in some earlier Merry Melodies, and it was used later on. Carl Stalling did implement it here and there. You also have Turkey in the Straw that's used. You have Kingdom Coming that you'll hear throughout the cartoon. You hear a little bit of characters sing It's Time to Sing Sweet Adeline Again. Thought it was really cool where one of the gangsters, the main gangster, starts whistling 42nd Street, which I've spoken before. That was written by Al Dubin and Harry Warren. You hear a little bit of, this is actually kind of relevant considering the passing of the Queen of England, Elizabeth II, but you hear a little bit of the British national anthem of God Save the Queen. My Country 'Tis Thee, or America here in the United States, is the same melody as God Save the Queen, the British national anthem. One of the moments that led me to becoming a musician was me singing My Country 'Tis Thee in my elementary school in front of a crowd of parents and students for open house in November of 1994 when I was 6. And after I got a nice big applause from the audience, I was like, man, this is really neat. Here I am nearly 30 years later yapping about music and old cartoons because I just absolutely love it. The opening titles features a song called Meet Me in the Gloaming. Meet Me in the Gloaming? No, it's Gloaming. Meet Me in the Gloaming. Let's go with that, all right? And I found a recording of it online that Frankie Valli did, which I thought was really neat. It's a really charming song. It really sticks on the opening credits, and you also see it when you start seeing the inside of the store. The melody kind of has a nice little dreamy air to it, has a nice little descending chromatic line and an ascending chromatic line, which really caught my attention. You only really hear this for 5 seconds, but when I was looking at the cue sheet, I noticed that it said Garibaldi hymn that was used in the cartoon. I'm like, what is that? And I checked, and it was the moment where you see the caricature of Benito Mussolini rallying the troops. And I didn't really think much of it, but then I was like, let me dig a little more. So I found a recording of a choir of Italian men singing the song. It has multiple names. It's actually called the Canzone Italiana, so Italian song, but it's better known by the title Inno di Garibaldi, which in English is the Hymn of Garibaldi, or some people call it the Garibaldi War Hymn, or just hymn itself. And the song itself was composed as an anthem for the Italian reunification. So for those of you that don't know, there were multiple countries, and during the 1800s, in the mid 1800s, Italy was united as one kingdom. For example, the opera composer Giuseppe Verdi, when he composed the music for the opera Nabucco. Probably the most famous piece from that opera is Va Pensiero song itself. The opening words are Va Pensiero, and it's also known by the chorus of the Hebrew slaves. And the opera is based off the story of Nebuchadnezzar from the Bible. But that song, and it's a beautiful, absolute beautiful piece of music to sing. And it kind of became a rallying cry for the Italian people to see their homeland become one and be united as one nation. And I didn't know that the Garibaldi hymn was also used for those purposes. And Garibaldi was an Italian general and patriot, revolution man, and he was one of the people responsible for having the Risorgimento of Italy occurring in the first place. The Risorgimento is Italian for resurgence, but pretty much unification of the Italian people. So, wow, I actually got a lot of information out there, and I didn't expect this one to be that long. And it's 12:30 in the morning, and I have to be up in a few hours because I have to sing in church. So those are my thoughts and opinions, and a little bit of Manny's music time for I Like Mountain Music. Pretty solid cartoon for this time period. And also, Anthony or Blue are going to kill me anyway for the editing. So sorry, fellas. But I hope you all enjoy this, and thank you very much for listening. I guess since I was talking about Italy, the only way I could end this commentary is Arrivederci, folks, since I don't know how to say folks in Italian.
Thank you, Manny. And don't worry, I actually enjoy editing you. Not really, but I have to be trying to be nice. But anyway, the score for this one for me, about 7.5 out of 10. It's enjoyable, and it showed how great the harmonizing studio were getting before they were given the boot by Leon Schlesinger and then went on to MGM. But that'll do it for this one. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, take care.